Only the government can tell you what to do, and we're going to take care of you. We're going to set up Social Security, is going to take care of you. Of course, there is no money there. I mean, they blew the whole thing, and we're limping along, and the young people know this, and it's all done with the idea that they were going to take care of people. But others say, well, we have to take care of you in your personal life because you might make a mistake and you might mess up. The hardest reason why people don't accept the ideas of freedom is that they don't want to accept the consequences of what happens. And that is the secret. If you want your freedom, like I do, you make your own choices about your personal life, your personal lifestyle, your religious lifestyle. If you mess up, you suffer the consequences. You can't go to the government begging and pleading to be bailed out. You know, the fact that we've drifted from our family means that we have allowed our government to take over control of education. Now, there was a time, this is so old-fashioned, there may be a couple of you in here remember it, but remember the old days when we had it in our platform to get rid of the Department of Education? That's what we ought to be doing. Those were back in the Ronald Reagan days. We'd even get rid of, back then we talked about getting rid of the Department of Energy, but we've had a few new departments established since then. But the bad part about this is the federal government is in charge. And what are we doing? We're expanding the Department of Education. No child left behind. It's twice as big as it was 10 years ago. But the principle is that the federal government has taken over the responsibility of education from you, the parent. The education of our children should be the responsibility of the parents. And if you're going to have local schools and local government schools, keep them local, but not to turn this over to the federal government. Before you know it, they're going to have the UN meddling in education, which they've already started to, and we don't need that. So one way that we can compensate for this is have more competition in education. And there is some. But it's not guaranteed it's going to be there. It's been attacked in the courts already, off and on. Even in the 80s, they tried to. And that is the right to homeschool your kids. You do have a right to do this. And private education. This is a benefit to everybody because it keeps even the public schools on their toes because the competition helps everybody. But the constitutional principle here is if we as a nation, if we as a country and a generation thought, yes, it's a good idea, parents aren't any good, they're not smart enough, local schools didn't work, the states have messed up, we need a strong Department of Education in Washington to save and take care of us and save the educational system. Then we should have had the guts to change the Constitution and not just run roughshod over the Constitution. And this is what we have been doing for so many decades. There's so little respect for the Constitution, the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch, because we don't pay that much attention to it. And a long time before anybody who is serving in the Congress now had so little respect for the monetary issue, something that motivated me in the very first time I ever ran for Congress. But the monetary issue is key. It's one of the most important issues going on right today. We have a dollar that is crashing, and it's related to everything that we do. It's related to the guns and the butter and the deficits, and it's not that complicated. And where can we find the answers? In the Constitution. The founders knew it and understood it, and they were good at economics. They had gone through the runaway inflation of the continental dollar, and it was destroyed. So they put in the Constitution, you can't emit bills of credit, which is paper money, and only silver and gold could be legal tender. But we didn't change the Constitution. We just ignored it. In 1913, up, bang, we create the Federal Reserve System. There's a day that's coming when we will wake up and realize that the Federal Reserve System is not our friend and we can do a lot better without it. Then, of course, if we started living within our means and living within the Constitution, and thinking about how government was run before 1913, it would all of a sudden dawn on us that we wouldn't even need the income tax. We could repeal the 16th Amendment. Now, of course, this scares a lot of people. They'll say, where are we going to get the money? You know, what are we going to do if you get rid of the income tax? What are you going to replace it with? Well, people have ways they want to replace it. I want to replace it with cutting spending. And I said, well, no, you can't do that. There won't be any money. But you know, if you got rid of the income tax today, we'd lose a third of our income. And we'd have the same amount of income we had 10 years ago. I mean, that's radical, but it's not as bad as the radicalism that we're endorsing. Endless spending and no confidence and no care about what we're doing. That's what we have to be concerned about. But these are areas that we as Republicans have talked about for so long. Fiscal responsibility, living within our means, sound money. And we even had at times over these many decades in my lifetime where the Republican Party had different positions on foreign policy, different positions that have played well for us. In the year 2000, our president talked about a humble foreign policy. He didn't think Clinton did a very good job policing the world and getting involved in nation building. It's not part of the Constitution. We're supposed to have a strong national defense. We're supposed to go to war only when it's declared. We're supposed to go to war, everybody behind it, win it, and get it over with if we have to go to war. I believe we live in historic times. Economically speaking, I think it's something that the world has never faced before because we are an integrated world. We have a global economy. The monetary system is intertwined, and it's been propped up for a long time. It's all a fiat system. There's no backing to any currency in the world. There's more debt than ever before, and there's more malinvestment and distortion. Governments want to continue it. So as soon as a bubble wants to pop, the politicians and the bankers and the central bank want to put it back together. So every time there was an attack on the system, as far back as the 1970s, it was always inflate, inflate, inflate. And that's what we've been doing. But right now, I think the world is now starting to see a crack in the big bubble. And every country now is suffering from the increase of inflation. Our government tells us that we have a 2 to 3% inflation rate. So that's why we can only increase the Social Security benefits by 2%. Well, the inflation rate for the people on retirement and living within their means on fixed income, it's 15%. They're suffering. And you say, how does that be? They say, well, what they do, when the report comes out, they'll say, well, this last week we had a 6% increase of prices in consumer products, but that was food and energy, and we'll delete that out and call it core rate inflation. But who gets along without energy and food? I mean, if you're elderly and retired, that might be the major part of your budget. So people are starting to suffer. The real reason why I talk about monetary policy is the most important economic issue. Because when you destroy a country, you transfer wealth from the middle class to the wealthy. And that is what's happening today. The poor pay the tax. We carelessly say, oh, the poor people don't pay any income tax. Well, they pay, you know, the withholding tax with the Social Security tax, which is very regressive and very high for the poor. But they pay the inflation tax. Because if we aren't responsible in the Congress, we might borrow a bunch from China, but they're not loaning it to us as readily anymore. So we resort to turning these treasury bills over to the Federal Reserve System, and they print the money out of clear blue, and sometimes 40 and 50 and $100 billion in 1 week. And all that does is devalue the currency. And the prices go up, and that is a tax. This idea that we were going to save the country by sending everybody a check for $600 is pretty amazing. We didn't have the money there. We didn't have one penny there, and yet, oh yes, this sounds good. It's going to stimulate the economy. Well, you know, all that money was probably eaten up in 30 days by the high rising prices of energy because it was anticipated that we'd have more inflation.